1971. Bangladesh Liberation War was one of the bloodiest wars in human history. Almost 3 million people died. But Henry Kissinger and President Nixon was supporting West Pakistan when their army was carrying out genocide of the East Pakistanis. The devil is dead. The epitome of evil is dead. Henry Kissinger is dead. The man who caused hundreds of thousands of Bangladeshis to die in 1973-74 famine. British veteran journalist John Pilcher had exposed Henry Kissinger in 1974.
I saw 4 dead children this morning heaped on a stretcher. One of them was about 18 months old, and I could tell this because his feet were the same size as my own son's. The rest of him was so thin and tortured that he no longer looked human. I'm told that he died from diarrhea after eating poison leaves because there was nothing else to eat. In other words, he starved to death. Of course, he didn't have to die, but unfortunately, the cost of keeping him alive was inflationary. Some milk powder and a handful of grain every day would have cost at least 20 pence. I must apologize. This really isn't appropriate New Year television, is it? Especially with all our own problems of inflation in Britain. Indeed, before I came here, I was told many times, don't do Bangladesh, people won't watch it, they'll switch over. And of course, I can sympathize with people who do switch over, because I realize that I and other reporters have helped to immunize people against Bangladesh by reporting their horrors year after year. But I do ask you to watch this film, because I believe that possibly the greatest famine in recorded history has now begun here, with tens of thousands of people already dead and dying and suffering. I also believe that Bangladesh could become the world's most ignored tragedy, because Mr. Kissinger and Mr. Brezhnev have now agreed on a world doctrine in which a country like Bangladesh is expendable. It has no oil, it has no real strategic value, it has no military power, it has no practical purpose. All it has is people who now wish to live.
He says that most of the cases, death cases, are from starvation.
On December the 8th, 1974, a secret report by the US State Department was leaked in Washington. It gave examples and details of the use of food as a means of shoring up one regime and blackmailing another. It quoted a top official whose job is to carry out Dr. Kissinger's strategic policies. He said, "To give food aid to countries just because they are starving is a pretty weak reason." It is now a famine relief center near Dhaka, and several thousand people are here. Almost all of them are starving, and many of the young children are suffering from typhoid, smallpox, and a thing called black fever. Many of them are dying. Not long ago, Dr. Henry Kissinger made his first visit to Bangladesh, squeezing it in between the Middle East and Moscow. He drove straight from the airport to the Intercontinental Hotel, talked for 1 hour with the Prime Minister, returned to the Intercontinental Hotel, held a press conference, drove back to the airport and left. Shortly after that, President Ford, on Dr. Kissinger's recommendation, halved the proposal for American emergency aid to Bangladesh. Instead, Bangladesh will receive more of the same from America. Boxes of army surplus biscuits and consignments of tents on which is written, "Important campers, don't forget to have fun." 6 million people died in concentration camps during 4 years in World War II. Almost as many people may have died in Bangladesh in the last 4 years. Years of drought, flood, epidemic, a genocidal war, and now famine, perhaps the greatest famine of all. I don't draw this parallel idly. I happen to be standing in the middle of a field piled high with human skeletons, bones and skulls and pieces of human hair for as far as I can see, now being picked over by crows. This is just one cemetery in Dhaka, and today they are digging up last month's famine victims in order to bury today's victims. 85 since 7 o'clock, 10,000 since last July, and most of them young, starved children. Many of these children died because they couldn't get milk. Last year, the United Nations in Dhaka stopped feeding starving children a powder made from milk and soya beans, simply because the common market countries had bought up all American soya bean stocks to use as cattle feed. And yet the EEC Council of Ministers haggle for months before releasing a miserable £63 million as relief aid, an eighth of what they had promised to 25 hungry countries, of which Bangladesh is but one. And incidentally, many of these children died because they found it impossible to eat what they got from the much-ballyhooed World Food Conference. Nothing but platitudes.
He's his son.
That's his son?
Son.
When did he die? Just today?
আজকে মারা গেছে আজকে রাতে মারা গেছে last night. Yes.
How old was he?
বয়স কত ছিল? বয়স 3 months. 3 months old.
Dr. Henry Kissinger opened the World Food Conference in Rome with these words.
We must proclaim a bold objective that within a decade, no child will go to bed hungry, that no family will fear for its next day's bread, and that no human being's future and capacities will be stunted by malnutrition. Our responsibility is clear. Let the nations gathered here resolve to confront the challenge and not each other.
My colleague, Eric Piper, took these pictures at a relief camp near Dhaka, one which Dr. Kissinger did not visit when he came to Bangladesh on October the 30th, 1974. On that day, a State Department official gave reporters an off-the-record briefing. He said, "Henry never wanted Bangladesh. With China firmly in place, there is no real strategic value here. There is nothing here, really."
I suggest you read Christopher Hitchens' trial of Henry Kissinger, and you will know the real face of this devil who just left this planet.
There's no reason to like me, but I mean, I would have pretended, if I was him, I'd have pretended, who's this guy Hitchens? I don't care. But I know I needled him. But more important, if you think of the things he's been found out as having done, lying about Vietnam, lying about Chile, Bangladesh, East Timor, the deaths of so many people needlessly, for the vanity of himself and his criminal president. We have other people from that period in our history, Robert McNamara, the Bundy brothers, others, William Colby, who, in their books and their memoirs, tried to make some kind of restitution. They said, actually, this was pretty bad policy. We sort of suspected at the time that it was bad, maybe worse, and we're sort of sorry. And actually, we have some evidence we feel we should share with you, some disclosures that you should have had at the time. Made some attempt. Kissinger's never said a word of self-criticism, not one. And he gets very petulant and angry